Hey folks, this is Fernando doing our video for the Mars Survivalist, and in this video I'll continue with a topic about relocating outside of the United States, leaving US, and maybe finding better places to live in. In my previous video I basically said that I personally don't think there's a better country to live in as of right now than the United States. In spite of everything wrong with it and such, at least that's the way I see it. And I think that for like-minded people, the United States is still the best place to live in. And I also said that there's no place like home, basically for anyone. There never will be, because you're linked to your cultural and social heritage. But especially for Americans, they will not find another place like the United States, basically because the United States is pretty unique in many of its aspects, right? That's what I said in the previous video. Lots of great comments because of that. So I really appreciate all you guys commenting, all of you. You know, you may agree, you may disagree, but I really appreciate at least sharing thoughts and such. I have here a comment by Rose Lassie, who feels very strongly about US not being a place to be in anymore. Sorry, felt the need to go on a bit about the situation people are facing here in the States, because I feel it's potentially a big mistake to say to people they should stay here. So Rose thinks people should not stay in the United States. So much of what is happening here is similar to the situation in Germany just prior to World War II. Some people saw writing on the wall. Well, basically Rose goes on about many of the negative stuff in the United States, which a lot of which I completely agree with her on. Well, she goes on about drones and fascism. Now, what I asked Rose, and I ask anyone watching this as well, is if you don't think that the United States is the place to be, and which other country would you think is the better option? For all these points, I mean, you believe that there's too much of a big government going on in the United States, which I agree with. It has been getting worse as years go by. It keeps getting worse. But where would you go? I'm honestly interested in knowing your opinion regarding that. So do leave it in the comment section if you have it. Rose says, the cost of living in the United States keeps on rising, inflation. And again, another thing, I do agree with her. The cost of living keeps rising, the inflation, even though they try to hide it with all the shrinking of products and such, and it's unavoidable. The cost of living, the inflation is there, the cost of living is rising in the United States. Where would you go, at least where do you think you would go for a more affordable living? I'll tell you right now, I've done a lot of research about all this stuff. There's at least on the same level of lifestyle, or at least close to it, you will not find a cheaper place to live in than the United States. In fact, many places much worse than the United States are more expensive to live in. That's the case of Argentina. It's more expensive to live in Argentina than it is to live in the United States. And believe me, the quality of life has no comparison whatsoever. It's cheaper to live in Florida than to live in Buenos Aires. Absolutely. And there's no comparison whatsoever between the two. So that's, where would you go? Europe? I'll tell you right now, Europe is not cheaper than the United States to live in. Not even close. Europe is definitely more expensive. Canada, more expensive. Australia, definitely more expensive. You don't have any other place for that same quality of life, at least close to it, cheaper than the United States. The United States is still one of the cheapest developed nations to live in. Again, if you have other suggestions, I'd love to hear them. Rose goes on and explains, it's a difficult situation globally for sure, and I certainly don't have all the answers. That's always the case. We No one has all the answers, but I can say that this country is increasingly unsafe for independent-minded people. Again, my same question: where would you go for greater independence for independent-minded people? Again, one of the things I've made reference to in a previous video about a lot of you guys thinking that you will find more freedom in crappy countries. You will find more freedom in third world countries because everything is a huge mess, everything is falling apart, there's no control. Not really that way. You don't have the law backing you anyway, and the things they want to do, the things in which they want to control you, they will have that. John McAfee, I think it was, he moved to Belize thinking that a crappy third world country was the key to freedom and independence and such. He had a pretty tough awakening when a politician pretty much, I mean, it's not that way. It may seem that way. It may seem that in a wild west type of third world country, you do whatever it is that you want. No, you don't do whatever it is that you want in a third world country. People ruling it do whatever it is that they want, and the law is not backing you up, and the corruption is just taking away what little you have of the law on your side. So, you know, developed countries by all means provide the safest environment for independent-minded people. Not all are the same. You don't have the same legal rights and all and such. But in general, corruption, guys, is the biggest enemy of freedom and liberty. So this idea of the more corrupt the country, the more freedom you have, it's always the opposite. The most corrupt the country, the less freedom people have. Never forget that. That's a pretty important thing. Rose says, but I can see that critically unsafe for independent people. I think guns aren't even the issue anymore, as they are taking people out by blowing up their houses with drones. I don't like drones either, you know, but guns, at least for me, they are a big part of the equation. Why is it? Because when you have the right to carry a gun, you at least have power with you. And this is the kind of thing that gets talked a lot in the in gun type of conversations and such. How much liberty does a gun really provide? Can you overthrow a government with a gun? Is a gun more powerful than a tank or missiles or a bomb or the army? The gun gives you power. There's no question about that whatsoever. And if you have any doubt about that, look at how many parts of the world in which citizens are not allowed to carry a gun with them at all times. Actually, the United States is the only one in which it's not a given right. It's a recognized right that you have. You know, in some other countries, very few countries, people with enough money manage to get a gun to carry with them. In no other country do you have the liberty of carrying concealed or let alone open carry. No other country has that, and I think it's a very big deal. I think it's a very big deal because notice one thing: you have countries that are more or less for or against guns. You have societies that are a little bit more or against guns. In Europe in general, guns are seen as evil tools and savage only carry guns. Very European thing of seeing Americans as Wild West cowboys with their guns, you know. Very snobby European attitude in general. All those Americans with their guns and such. And of course politicians in these European countries or Australia or any other country that you'd like to think of, you see the politicians talking about what guns, what people carrying guns. They look like all offended and surprised. Every single freaking one of those presidents may not be carrying a gun themselves, but they surround themselves with trained professionals that carry firearms for them. Notice how hypocrite the situation is. These guys with their nice suits talking about what people with guns, so that's so barbaric. That's what American cowboys with guns and such. Yeah, sure, you're talking about others being barbaric because they want to have guns, but you surround yourself with trained, armed professionals that are willing and capable of killing anyone that even slightly puts you at risk, but you're taking away the right of the layman average guy to defend himself in somewhat of a similar manner. At least to me, that's extremely hypocritical, and at least to me, that's one of the greatest things the United States has: the guns. It's just even if you don't like guns, you have to appreciate a country where people have that right. At the end of the day, an armed society is a free society. It's always been that way. It's a huge point in why I think that still the United States is the place to be in, because even if you don't like guns, even if you don't carry one, even though I think you should, but even if you don't, the fact that people have that right means that there's always going to be a natural limit to what the government can and cannot get away with, because this may be a little bit of a surprise, but no government can rule, and there cannot be tyranny with an armed society, because the handgun will always beat the tanks and the missiles. There's simply no way in which a government can use its own muscle, its own strength, tanks, the military, whatever you want to think of these huge war machines. The little humble handgun will always beat it when it's in the hands of the society, because you have millions of shooters in the society. You have the population being armed. There's no way of stopping that if they all rise at the same time or somewhat at the same time. So a government, it has to be very careful of what they do when they are dealing with such a heavily armed society. And it's completely false, this idea that armed societies are barbaric. Actually, one of the things that I've written about in my upcoming book that hopefully will be out soon enough, just finishing editing, should be ready soon enough, is that take a look at the top 10 most armed countries in the world, and take a look at the less armed countries in the world. Yeah, sure, some of the countries in the top 10 most armed countries in the world, the United States is among those top 10 countries of more guns per capita. But if you look at the top 10 countries in terms of firearms, they are some of the most advanced, some of the best countries in the world by anyone's standard. By anyone's standard, take a look at the top 10 countries in terms of firearms, and take a look at the lowest 10, 20 countries in terms of firearms, and there's no comparison. The top 10 most armed societies are far better than the lowest 10 or lowest 20 countries. And in the middle, you have a little bit of everything, but the best countries are the most armed societies. It's an expression of freedom in many ways. I don't want to get too sidetracked on there, but the fact about being armed is a huge point. Another comment that I'd like to address: the Daily Prepper. Dude, Daily Prepper, always appreciate your comments. Thanks for being there and commenting. Says, Fairfeld, great video as always, my friend. I think I'm on the American, one of the Americans who is very quick to believe the grass must be greener somewhere else. So it's probably wise for me to slow down and chill out. Still, you made the comment, I don't think. Well, first about that, the grass must be greener, a very common thing, and very natural thing that you come across. People usually thinking that the grass is greener on the other side of a hill. Happens all the time. I mean, we just tend to do that. We just tend to think that, that our place that we don't actually know probably is better than what we're now. That happens, but I've also learned that you have the other side of the equation as well. You have people that believe that what they see is the best thing that there is. and the grass is never going to be greener on the other side of a hill. You have that as well. And you know what? In general, the lower on socioeconomic standards, the lowest segment tends to think that way. The poorest part of society, or the lowest socioeconomic part of society, tends to think that the grass is never going to be greener on the other side of the hill. That's something that I've noticed, especially in Argentina, among the lowest sector in terms of socioeconomically speaking. They tend to think that what they live is, at least as good as what's found elsewhere. If they are poor, they think that, there's poverty everywhere. There's poverty in US, there's poverty in Europe. At least here we have football, we have yerba mate, we have the beautiful people, the best looking people in the world. We have football, soccer, which is life for some of these guys that have so little in terms of pretty much anything else. Being poor, having almost no education. For them, life is having a good time on weekends and going to the football matches, and that's life for them. And the grass is never going to be greener for them on the other side of a hill. Now, if you talk among middle class, more informed people, they will usually see it as, maybe the grass is greener on the other side of a hill. It's not always the case, and I do agree with the Daily Prepper on that it's a common mistake to think that the grass is always greener on the other side. But at least that's the kind of thing that happens more commonly among the more educated people, about considering the possibility, at least, of the grass being greener on the other side of a hill. When you talk among middle class folks in Argentina, they tend to be a little bit better informed. Some of them are more, I consider myself level-headed, and at least I try to be as objective as possible. And you start analyzing things, and you start looking at all these charts and figures and rankings, and you know what, when you're not even close, you have to admit, okay, we have these huge problems with the economy, we have these huge problems with crime and such, so dangerous living here in Argentina. We have good things going for us, but the grass has to be greener on the other side of the hill. Going back to the comment by the Daily Prepper, still, you made the comment, I don't think you're gonna find what you're looking for anywhere else. Both the Heritage Foundation and the Cato Institute conduct huge, extensive studies on the personal and economic liberties in the countries of the world. The US continues to drop in rankings, and there are plenty of other countries above or on par with us. Heritage rankings, all these guys, the Daily Prepper's comments, it's in the comment section of the previous video that I uploaded, so if you want to go to the links there. Cato rankings and such. He says then, my advice, date before you marry. Go live somewhere else 6-12 months before you sell your house in the United States and move. I haven't done this yet, but I plan to. I think it's a good idea, especially if you're, for young folks and such, living elsewhere. It opens up your mind. It gives you a better, at the very least, it's going to be giving you an appreciation of what you have. You're going to be richer because of the experience alone. I've lived in a few places, and I think that I'm better off because of that. It gives you a more broader perspective. Culture is always good, and when you live in different places, you add to it. It's always good. And I agree with that. Live somewhere else, at least for some time, if you can. It's going to be an experience, a growth, personal growth experience for you. And I do agree with the Daily Prepper as well. There are better countries, at least when you look at some things. Are you looking for a safer country than the United States? There are better countries regarding that than the United States. There are safer countries than the United States. Safer countries to live in, safer societies than the United States. No doubt whatsoever, The charts, the rankings are there, and they are correct, they are true. Are there countries with less poverty than the United States? Yes, they are. So if that for you makes them better, there are better countries in that regard as well. Are there countries with better education than the United States? Yeah, I mean, here in Europe in general, many countries in Europe have better. Ireland has outstanding education, public education, much better than the United States. In many ways, it would be a better childhood for kids. I think it is. Being safer, having better education. You have countries that have that are better than the United States regarding that. There's another comment here by someone else that moved. Let's see if I find it quickly. Someone that moved to Scandinavia, I think. I bugged out of the States to Scandinavia 2 decades ago. Best decision I ever made. Safe, good family, better life, and opportunities. Scandinavia is better than the United States pretty much in everything that you look at. In terms of safety, quality of life, all these things. Scandinavia has a pretty crappy weather. Scandinavia does not have the good gun laws that I try to make a very good case for it. Even on the economic stuff that the Daily Prepper was talking about, I think that you have to make the difference between big corporations and small layman type of guy, small businesses. I think that even for small businesses and such, US would still be one of the best countries. And there's so many opportunities, and it's easier for people to get started than in Europe, at least based on what I've seen. At least for small businesses, personal businesses and such, US is still pretty good. But yes, it is true. When you look at it that way, there are better countries than the United States. But going back to what I said in the beginning, when you look at the entire picture, especially for guys of our own way of viewing things, the liberties that you have, in Scandinavia, places like that, very organized and such, the personal freedoms, the personal liberties that you have, I don't think that you have. And even if you have great life opportunities, Scandinavia is without a doubt one of the top ranking countries. Now, again, I would say, Norway, Sweden, those are some of the best countries to live in and better than the United States. If you're thinking of moving there, you have to also consider the language barrier. It's gonna be an issue if you don't speak the language. If you're not ready to speak it, you are gonna be in a disadvantage. Culturally, this guy adapted very well, likes a lot, and is happy with the decision. I can see that absolutely. I can also see an American moving to Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and just wanting to kill himself 6 months later because the culture is completely different. Both for good and bad. A Texan moving to Scandinavia will be, oh man, it's a pretty much a different culture in Europe in general. So there was a chart. One of the things I was looking for my book, best country to be born in. The difference between being born in a country and relocating, that's a key element, because you're not bringing the baggage of your own heritage. Best country to be born in, Sweden, Scandinavia, sure. But for an American moving to some of these countries, you will be struggling with. It's not going to be as easy. So I pretty much agree with many of the things that you guys shared. Just more food for thought. At the end of the day, I think that the Daily Prepper had a great point. If you want to do that sort of thing, live there for 6-12 months. I would recommend 12 months. Live somewhere else for 12 months. At least it's going to be an experience. If you love the decision, you can stay there. If not, move back home. But before making a big move, before selling the house, have that experience first. And then you'll be able to have a better opinion about it. Guys, more stuff coming up. Have a great day. Subscribe. See you on our next video.